There's a reason your gut speaks before your mind can make sense of it. When you're dating someone new, it's easy to fall for the smiles, the chemistry, and the attention. But beneath the surface, truth always reveals itself, not in grand gestures, but in the small moments, the inconsistencies, the quiet red flags. One of the clearest signs that something isn't right in a relationship isn't what someone says. It's what they do when they think you're no longer paying attention. Words are powerful, but they are also cheap. Anyone can say they care. Anyone can promise the world. But the real measure of a person is in the consistency between their words and their actions. If you find yourself in a space where someone keeps telling you how much you mean to them, yet their behavior leaves you confused, anxious, or questioning your worth, then you are not being loved. You're being pacified. Inconsistency creates emotional instability. One day they're attentive, affectionate, and present. The next, they're cold, distant, or disappear without explanation. And when you ask why, you're made to feel like you're overreacting. That emotional roller coaster isn't a sign of passion, it's a symptom of unreliability. Healthy love is not hot and cold. It doesn't need you to decode silence or justify neglect. You shouldn't have to become a detective to figure out where you stand in someone's life. This kind of behavior chips away at your self-esteem. You start to blame yourself for the gaps in their effort. You rationalize the inconsistency by calling it bad timing or personal struggles, hoping that if you just hold on long enough, they'll become who they promised to be. But love that is real doesn't ask you to hold on to potential. It doesn't thrive on excuses or force you to beg for clarity. The truth is, a person who is emotionally mature will align their behavior with their intentions. If they say they care, they will show up. Not just when it's convenient or when they want something, but consistently, especially in the small things. They will make time. They will follow through. And if they can't, they will communicate, not disappear. Because someone who values you doesn't play guessing games with your heart. You deserve more than someone who makes you question your place in their life. You deserve more than apologies without change, promises without proof, and affection that only shows up when it benefits them. Inconsistency isn't just a red flag. It's a roadmap to heartache. And the longer you stay, the more lost you become in a version of love that was never real to begin with. What's even more dangerous is how this inconsistency starts to feel normal. You become conditioned to chaos, to waiting, to hoping they'll show up the way they did in the beginning. But that version of them, the one who made you feel special and seen, wasn't consistent for a reason. It may have been genuine for a moment, or it may have been a mask. But the real them is who they are every day, not just who they are when they want to impress you. And here's the hard truth. If someone truly wants you in their life, they will never leave you confused about it, not for a moment. They won't just talk about effort, they will give effort. They won't just talk about change, they will live it. You'll never have to chase, prove, or beg, because consistency speaks louder than charm. Presence is more valuable than promises. And genuine love is found in the daily actions, not the dramatic declarations. Some people want the comfort of you without the commitment to you. They like having you around, but only on their terms. They want access to your love, your time, your energy, but without the responsibility that comes with truly valuing another human being. And that's not love, that's convenience. And you're not here to be someone's convenient option while they figure themselves out. The most powerful thing you can do is stop waiting for someone to become who they're not willing to be. See the pattern for what it is, not what you hope it will become. The longer you stay attached to someone's potential, the more you abandon your own. You cannot build something real with someone who is only halfway in. You cannot grow if you're constantly being uprooted by their inconsistency. You deserve someone who is sure of you, someone who doesn't vanish when things get hard, someone who shows up, not just when it's easy or exciting, but especially when it's uncomfortable. Because that's what real love does. It stays. It shows up. It honors its word, even when no one's watching. If you're in a relationship that leaves you constantly guessing, doubting, or feeling like you're the only one trying, take a step back. Look at the actions. Look at the pattern. Because the truth is, love isn't supposed to be confusing. Real love is clear. Real love shows up. And the moment you stop accepting less is the moment you make space for the kind of love that doesn't just speak, it proves. Emotional availability is the heartbeat of a real connection. Without it, every relationship becomes a performance. One person doing the heavy lifting, while the other stands behind a wall they refuse to tear down. You can sit beside them, talk to them for hours, share your fears, your dreams, your soul. But if they're emotionally shut off, it feels like you're always reaching out into empty space, hoping this time they'll reach back. And they never really do. Maybe they give you moments, fleeting glimpses of warmth, small fragments of vulnerability, but they never stay there long. One minute they're listening and open, the next they're distant and cold. When you ask how they feel, they dodge. When you share something personal, they change the subject or brush it off. When things start getting too real, they disappear, not always physically, but emotionally. They become unavailable, not because they're busy, but because they're afraid to be seen. Lack of emotional availability isn't always loud. It can hide behind charm. It can disguise itself in casual dating or jokes about not being ready for anything serious. It can look like ambition, like they're too focused on their career or goals to commit. But underneath it all, there's a deeper truth. Emotional availability requires courage. It takes a willingness to be vulnerable, to be honest, to risk connection. Not everyone is ready for that, and that's not your fault. But here's where it gets painful. You keep holding on, thinking if you love them enough, support them enough, give them enough time, they'll eventually let you in. You believe you can be the exception, that your patience will heal them, that one day they'll wake up and realize you've been the one all along. But that day never really comes. Because change doesn't happen in comfort. And most emotionally unavailable people are comfortable exactly where they are, guarded, detached, and in control of what they show. What happens next is subtle, but damaging. You start shrinking yourself. You stop expressing your needs because every time you do, it feels like too much. You walk on emotional eggshells, afraid to ask for clarity, terrified to show disappointment because deep down, you already know. They won't meet you halfway. You begin to accept crumbs of attention as a feast. You start confusing intensity for intimacy, chaos for passion, and silence for peace. You deserve more than someone who only opens up when it benefits them. Someone who listens but doesn't respond. Someone who takes comfort in your vulnerability but withholds their own. You deserve a relationship where both people show up with their whole hearts. Where emotions are not viewed as burdens, but as bridges. Where communication doesn't feel like pulling teeth, and connection doesn't come at the cost of your emotional health. It's not your job to fix someone's emotional wounds. It's not your role to force open doors they've spent years keeping locked. Love is not a rescue mission. You are not meant to bleed for someone who won't even reach for a bandage. And staying in a relationship with someone emotionally unavailable doesn't make you loyal. It makes you invisible to yourself. Some people carry trauma they've never healed. Others fear rejection so much they build walls before anyone gets close. Some have been hurt, abandoned, or betrayed. And while we can empathize with that pain, we also have to accept this truth. Understanding someone's wounds doesn't require you to live inside them. Compassion does not mean self-abandonment. And love, real love, is mutual, not one-sided effort dressed up as commitment. If you find yourself constantly wondering how someone feels, constantly trying to interpret mixed signals, constantly feeling emotionally exhausted from trying to connect with someone who won't open up, it's time to step back and ask yourself why you're staying. Is it hope? Is it fear? Is it the belief that this is as good as it gets? because it's not. You are not hard to love. You are not asking for too much. Wanting emotional connection, consistency, and vulnerability is not a weakness. It's the foundation of any relationship that's meant to last. And if someone can't meet you there, it doesn't mean you're too much. It means they're not enough for where you're going. It's okay to walk away from someone who isn't ready. You don't have to stay just because you see their potential. You can love someone and still choose yourself. And sometimes, the most loving thing you can do is let go of what hurts, so you can make space for what heals. Because the truth is, you deserve a love that shows up fully. A love that doesn't hide behind silence or fear. A love that doesn't make you feel alone while standing next to someone. And when you stop settling for halfway hearts, you'll finally find the one that beats in rhythm with yours. Control doesn't always look like someone yelling or slamming doors. Sometimes it's subtle. Sometimes it hides behind sweet words, protective gestures, and things that sound like care. But there's a difference between someone protecting you and someone trying to own you. And that difference becomes painfully clear when you start to feel like your independence is slipping away. Not all at once, but little by little, in ways you barely notice at first. At the beginning, it might seem flattering. They check in on you constantly. They want to know where you are, who you're with, and when you'll be home. You might mistake that attention for love, for concern. But over time, the questions become expectations. The check-ins become demands. Suddenly, it's not just, "I miss you." It's, "Why didn't you answer me right away?" It's not just, "Who were you with?" It's, "I don't like when you hang out with them." You start to feel the tension when you try to do things on your own. And before you know it, your world has quietly started to shrink. Control thrives in the disguise of care. But real care doesn't make you feel smaller. It doesn't require you to lose yourself to keep the peace. When someone is controlling, they slowly separate you from your support system. Friends you used to laugh with, family you used to call, goals you used to chase, all become less of a priority. Not because you chose to abandon them, but because it became easier than defending them. You start avoiding the fights, the guilt trips, the accusations, and in doing so, you begin to lose pieces of yourself. Manipulation doesn't always show up with cruelty. Sometimes it comes with charm, the kind that makes you question your own feelings. You express something that hurt you, and instead of listening, they twist it back on you. Suddenly, you're apologizing for being too sensitive. You try to set a boundary, and they call you selfish. You speak your truth, and they make you feel guilty for it. Over time, you begin to second-guess your instincts. You start to wonder if you're the problem. You begin to silence your voice, not because you don't have something to say, but because you're afraid of the fallout. This is what emotional manipulation does. It rewrites your reality. It convinces you to doubt what you feel and ignore what you see. You start carrying the weight of two people, walking on eggshells just to avoid another storm. And even when things are calm, you don't feel safe. You feel relief. But relief is not peace. It's just the absence of conflict. And relationships built on control and manipulation are never truly peaceful. They're just quiet between battles. You were not made to be controlled. You were not created to shrink so someone else could feel secure. Love is not supposed to be a power struggle. It's not about dominance. It's about freedom. The freedom to be yourself without fear. The freedom to speak without being silenced. The freedom to grow, even if that growth means becoming stronger, more independent, more you. Anyone who tries to take that away from you isn't loving you. They're using you to manage their own insecurities. Sometimes, people control because they're afraid of losing. But controlling someone doesn't create closeness. It creates distance. And people who manipulate are not trying to understand you. They're trying to make you easier to control. That's not connection. That's possession. And you're not someone to be possessed. You are not an object. You are not an extension of someone else's need for validation or power. It takes strength to recognize control for what it is, especially when it's dressed in love. It takes courage to see manipulation in someone you care about. But once you see it, you can't unsee it. You begin to realize how long you've been giving more than you've received, how many times you've silenced yourself just to keep the peace, how deeply you've learned to live in survival mode within a space that was supposed to be safe. You don't owe anyone your freedom. You don't have to stay in a place where love feels like a trap. Love should never come with conditions that make you erase yourself. The right person will never need to control you to feel loved. They will never punish your independence, never guilt you into obedience, never use your love as a weapon. The right person will respect your no. They will honor your boundaries. They will listen when you speak, not twist your words to win an argument. Walking away from control isn't betrayal. It's survival. It's choosing to reclaim your voice, your power, your sense of self. It's choosing to believe that love, real love, is not supposed to hurt, manipulate, or confine. It's supposed to breathe life into you, not drain it from you. You deserve to feel free in love. You deserve to be respected in every space you walk into, especially the ones closest to your heart. So if someone makes you feel like you can't be fully you, listen to that. Because the moment you stop confusing control for care is the moment you take your power back for good. Boundaries are not walls. They're doors with locks, meant to protect, not to isolate. They tell others where you end and they begin. They're how you say, this is what I'm okay with, and this is what I'm not. And anyone who truly respects you will listen when you set a boundary. They won't push. They won't test. They won't make you feel guilty for having lines they cannot cross. But when you're with someone who constantly disrespects those boundaries, what they're really telling you is this: my comfort matters more than your safety. Disrespecting boundaries rarely shows up all at once. It starts small. Maybe you say you don't like being joked about in public, and they do it anyway. Maybe you ask for space when you're upset, but they push, demanding answers when you're not ready. Maybe you say no to something once, and they keep asking until your no turns into a yes just to avoid the tension. Over time, the message becomes clear. Your limits are negotiable, your comfort is secondary, and your voice is only respected when it matches their desires. And slowly, something dangerous begins to happen. You stop trusting yourself. You start questioning if your boundaries are too much, too rigid, too sensitive. You start giving in to keep the peace. You learn to tolerate what you once stood against. You silence your own needs just to avoid being called difficult or dramatic. And in that silence, you begin to lose yourself. Not because someone took your power, but because you kept handing it over piece by piece, hoping they would respect you once you became easier to deal with. But the truth is, anyone who requires you to betray your boundaries in order to be loved isn't loving you at all. Love that matters doesn't come at the cost of your self-respect. You shouldn't have to explain over and over why something makes you uncomfortable. You shouldn't have to fight to be heard or beg to be honored. Boundaries are not selfish. They are the highest form of self-care. They are how you teach people to treat you. And someone who keeps crossing them is not confused. They are choosing to put their desires above your dignity. Some people will call your boundaries a problem because they benefit from your lack of them. They liked it better when you stayed quiet, gave in, said yes out of fear instead of choice. But you weren't put here to be agreeable at the expense of your own peace. You weren't made to shrink just so someone else can stretch. Relationships built on guilt, pressure, and disrespect are not relationships. They're control disguised as closeness. You might be afraid that if you draw a line, you'll lose them. But if someone walks away because you set a boundary, let them go. Because the cost of keeping them is far greater. It will cost you your confidence, your peace, your identity. And nothing is worth that. Not attention, not affection, not the illusion of love. The people who are meant to stay in your life won't punish you for having standards. They will thank you for having the strength to communicate them. And they'll show you, not just with words but with action, that your comfort and well-being are priorities they're willing to honor. Boundaries are not meant to push people away. They're meant to create clarity. They show you who is capable of loving you in the way you deserve, and who only loves you when it's easy for them. They reveal whether someone is truly invested in building something mutual, or just in getting what they want with as little resistance as possible. And sometimes, the clearest signal you'll ever get about someone's character is how they respond to a simple word: no. You can't build a healthy future with someone who makes you feel unsafe when you stand up for yourself. Love should never feel like a negotiation with your values. You should never have to apologize for protecting your heart. And the moment you start normalizing boundary-breaking behavior, you begin to teach yourself that discomfort is love, that pain is proof of connection, and that surrender is a requirement for intimacy. But it's not. Real connection doesn't require you to abandon yourself. It calls you to be more of who you are, not less. The longer you tolerate disrespect, the more it becomes your normal. But there's nothing normal about having to fight to be heard, to be respected, to be treated like your feelings matter. That is not love. That is emotional erosion. And the longer you stay in it, the harder it becomes to remember what respect even feels like. You have every right to say, "This makes me uncomfortable. I don't like this. I need space. I'm not okay with that." You have every right to be clear, to stand firm, to say no without 1,000 explanations. And you have every right to walk away from anyone who treats those boundaries like obstacles instead of instructions. Because the moment you stop apologizing for your limits is the moment you stop living in fear. It's the moment you begin to attract people who are not threatened by your strength, but inspired by it. And that kind of connection, the one built on mutual respect, is the kind that doesn't just survive. It grows, it thrives, and it lasts. Inconsistent communication is the quiet killer of connection. It doesn't come with big arguments or dramatic exits. It's slower, more subtle. It looks like unanswered messages, canceled plans, sudden disappearances followed by warm returns. It's someone pulling you in just enough to keep you hopeful, then vanishing just long enough to leave you questioning everything. And the worst part is, you start blaming yourself for the silence. At first, it's easy to excuse. Life gets busy. People go through things. Not every conversation can be perfect. But when the silence becomes a pattern, when their presence feels like a reward you have to earn, something starts to shift inside you. You find yourself waiting, not just for texts or calls, but for clarity, for some sign that they're still invested, that you still matter. But all you get are breadcrumbs, just enough to keep you hanging on. Inconsistent communication creates emotional whiplash. One moment they're all in, attentive, affectionate, engaged. And just when you start to trust it, they pull back. No explanation, no warning, just distance. And in that distance, you begin to spiral. You overthink every message, analyze every word, wonder if you said too much or not enough. You start questioning your worth based on how quickly they reply. And somewhere in that chaos, you forget that love isn't supposed to feel like chasing. You shouldn't have to convince someone to be consistent. You shouldn't feel like you're always waiting for them to choose you, again and again. Love doesn't need to be reminded of your existence. Real communication doesn't ghost you, breadcrumb you, or make you feel like a burden when you reach out. It shows up. It stays. It creates space, even in the busiest moments, to say, "You matter to me." But when someone's communication is hot and cold, it sends a message louder than words. You are an option, not a priority. And over time, you start to internalize that. You begin to think, maybe this is normal. Maybe this is what love looks like now. You lower your standards, shrink your expectations, and tell yourself not to ask for too much, just to keep them around. But love built on silence and inconsistency is not love. It's confusion dressed up as chemistry. It's easy to believe that if you're more patient, more understanding, more available, they'll finally be consistent. But communication is not a skill they'll magically develop because you're good enough. It's a choice, a commitment. And if they're not making that choice every day, it's not because of what you lack. It's because of what they're unwilling to give. You deserve someone who doesn't disappear when things get inconvenient. Someone who doesn't leave you wondering where you stand. You deserve someone who speaks with clarity, listens with intent, and shows you through action that you're not alone in the effort. Consistency is not about perfection. It's not about texting back within seconds or having endless conversations. It's about reliability, about making you feel secure, not scattered. Seen, not sidelined. The danger of inconsistent communication is that it trains you to live in emotional scarcity. It teaches you to get excited over the bare minimum. A reply becomes a gift. A call becomes a victory. You begin to confuse attention with affection and effort with love. But the truth is, anyone can send a text. Anyone can make you feel wanted in moments. The real question is, do they show up when it matters? Do they stay when it's not convenient? Are they consistent when you need stability the most? Because love isn't just about what happens in the highs. It's about what remains in the in-betweens. It's about showing up on the ordinary days when there's no pressure, no urgency, just choice. And if someone chooses silence, confusion, or absence over and over again, that is your answer. Not a mystery to solve, but a reality to accept. You don't have to wait for someone to get it together. You don't need to stay in limbo, holding on to moments that are inconsistent and calling them love. You are allowed to want more, to ask for clarity, to expect presence, not because you're needy, but because that's what healthy connection looks like. And if they can't give it, then let them go. Because someone out there is waiting to meet you with intention. Someone who doesn't flinch at consistency, who doesn't view communication as a chore, but as a privilege. Someone who will never make you guess or beg or wait. They'll just show up, fully, honestly, every day, and remind you that when it's right, it doesn't feel confusing. It feels calm. It feels steady. It feels like home. One of the clearest signs of emotional maturity is the ability to take responsibility. To say, I was wrong, I hurt you, I should have done better. But when someone refuses to own their actions, when they constantly deflect blame or make excuses, it becomes a heavy weight that you end up carrying for them. A relationship without accountability becomes a cycle, not a partnership. It's not about two people growing together. It's one person growing while the other stays comfortable, untouched by consequence. At first, it might seem harmless. They forget something important. They miss a call. They say something that cuts deep. And when you bring it up instead of listening, they get defensive. They make it about your reaction instead of their action. Suddenly, you're comforting them for hurting you. You're explaining why your feelings are valid while they twist the situation until you feel like the one who's done something wrong. This isn't conflict resolution. It's emotional avoidance. And over time, it becomes the norm. When someone refuses to be accountable, you become the emotional caretaker of the relationship. You're the one always reflecting, always adjusting, always trying to fix the atmosphere. You begin to believe that if you could just communicate better, be calmer, be more forgiving, things would improve. But growth doesn't happen when only one person is doing the work. A relationship where only one side takes responsibility is an emotional imbalance. It feels like running a race while the other person watches from the sidelines, expecting you to carry them the whole way. Lack of accountability doesn't mean someone is always cruel or toxic on purpose. Sometimes, it's subtle. It shows up in the way they never apologize unless you push. It's the constant minimization of your pain. It's how every conversation ends with, well, I wouldn't have done that if you hadn't. And eventually you find yourself holding in your feelings just to avoid being blamed for them. That's not peace. That's self-abandonment. It's important to understand that accountability is not about perfection. Everyone makes mistakes. Everyone has moments where they react poorly or fall short. But when someone truly values you, they will acknowledge the harm they cause. They will take ownership, not just to calm things down, but because they care about doing better. They don't see your pain as an inconvenience. They see it as an opportunity to grow. That is what builds trust. That is what creates emotional safety. Without accountability, the same patterns keep repeating. Apologies become meaningless because they're not backed by change. You start to notice that every time there's a problem, somehow it ends with you fixing it. They shut down, and you're the one trying to open the door again. They cross a line and you end up stepping back just to keep the peace. This is how you slowly get trained to accept less, to tolerate disrespect, to lower your standards, not because you want to, but because every attempt to raise them gets met with resistance or guilt. And the truth is, love can't thrive where growth is off limits. Relationships are not about avoiding mistakes. They're about learning from them. And if someone won't even admit that they've made one, they are choosing their ego over your connection. You cannot teach someone to care about how they make you feel. They have to decide that on their own. And if they won't take responsibility, you have to take responsibility for yourself by refusing to stay in spaces that require you to shrink in order to be loved. Sometimes we stay with the people who avoid accountability because we hope they'll eventually see the impact of their actions. But waiting for someone to evolve while they keep repeating the same harm isn't love. It's self-neglect. It's telling yourself that your needs will matter later, after they change, after they realize, after they grow. But growth doesn't happen in the future. It happens in the now. And right now, if they're not showing up with honesty, with effort, with a willingness to be better, then you're building a life on broken promises. You deserve someone who can say, "I hurt you, and I'm sorry." Someone who listens without trying to shift the blame. Someone who doesn't see your pain as an attack, but as something they have a responsibility to understand and help heal. You deserve a partner who is not afraid of accountability, but sees it as a strength, proof that they are willing to grow with you, not just benefit from your patience. Walking away from someone who refuses to own their actions is not giving up. It's choosing to stop making excuses for behavior that keeps breaking you. It's choosing your emotional clarity over their emotional comfort. And it's realizing that the kind of love that lasts, the kind that transforms and strengthens, only exists when both people are willing to face themselves, take responsibility, and commit to doing better. You are not too much for asking someone to own their behavior. You are not hard to love because you want honesty, growth, and emotional maturity. Those are not high standards. They are basic foundations. And anyone who treats them like a burden is not ready for the kind of love you're capable of giving. Control often disguises itself as care. It sounds like concern. It looks like protection. At first, it even feels like love. Someone asking where you are, who you're with, what you're wearing. They want to know everything. And in the beginning, you tell yourself it's because they care deeply. You confuse their constant check-ins and jealous glances for passion. But control doesn't come wrapped in violence at first. It comes in small, almost invisible strings. And by the time you realize they're not strings, but chains, it's already harder to breathe. Control is not about love. It's about power. It's about one person needing to manage everything you do, because deep down, they are terrified of losing control of themselves. So instead of dealing with their own insecurities, they try to manage yours. They disguise their fear as rules. They expect you to ask for permission instead of giving you the freedom to be trusted. And slowly, they shrink your world. They separate you from friends. They criticize the way you dress. They question every decision. Not with curiosity, but with judgment. Until you're no longer making choices, you're just avoiding punishment. When someone starts to control you, they aren't protecting you. They are removing your ability to protect yourself. They want the version of you that fits into their comfort zone. The one who doesn't push back, doesn't question, doesn't resist. They want the version of you that needs them more than you need your own voice. And that's how people get trapped, not by locked doors, but by constant doubt, by the quiet pressure to surrender your independence in exchange for temporary peace. You don't always notice the control right away because it's wrapped in affection. They say things like, "I just want what's best for you," or "I know you better than anyone." They make you feel like your own instincts can't be trusted, that their way is always the better way. And at some point, you stop deciding for yourself, not because you forgot how, but because every time you did, it led to guilt, conflict, or cold silence. And here's the truth. Any love that requires you to silence your voice is not love. It's obedience. Control does not make relationships stronger. It makes them smaller. Real connection doesn't thrive under pressure. It thrives in freedom, in respect, in knowing that you can be your full self without being edited to fit someone else's insecurities. The moment someone starts controlling you, they are no longer seeing you as a partner. They are seeing you as property. And people are not possessions. You may start justifying the control because you don't want to believe it's manipulation. You tell yourself they're just protective, or that you'd rather avoid fights than challenge them. But every time you bend to keep the peace, you lose a piece of yourself. You begin to confuse safety with silence. You begin to accept that love is supposed to feel restrictive, that relationships are meant to have rules instead of mutual respect. And that's when you start losing not only your voice, but your identity. Healthy love is not about keeping someone close through fear. It's about choosing each other in full freedom. It's about trusting one another to make decisions, to grow, to have separate lives that enrich your shared one. You deserve to be with someone who doesn't need to control you to feel secure. Someone who understands that trust is not earned through dominance, but through communication, through letting go, not holding tighter. If someone is constantly trying to control who you are, who you speak to, what you wear, what you do, they are not trying to love you. They are trying to mold you. And people who love molds more than they love people are not ready for real intimacy. Because real intimacy comes from seeing someone fully, hearing them clearly, and letting them be. Not because you're weak, but because you're strong enough to love without fear. The most dangerous thing about controlling behavior is how it erodes your self-trust. You stop listening to your gut. You second-guess your judgment. You ask for permission before doing things that once came naturally. And eventually, you forget that you were ever allowed to be free, that you were ever whole without them. But you were, and you still are. Control should never be mistaken for commitment. Love should never feel like surveillance. You don't need to be managed. You need to be understood, supported, respected. And if someone can't love you without trying to control you, then they're not loving you. They're loving the version of you they can dominate. You were not born to be caged. You were not meant to be handled like a problem. You are allowed to take up space, to choose your own path, to live your life on your terms. Love, at its highest form, is not possession. It's permission. The freedom to be all of who you are with someone who feels honored to witness it, not threatened by it. If any of these red flags feel familiar, pause. Not to overthink, but to wake up. This isn't just about love. This is about your life. The people you allow into your heart will either elevate you or exhaust you. So stop making excuses for behavior that confuses you, controls you, or makes you feel less than whole. You are not here to be someone's emotional project. You are not here to constantly fix, chase, or convince someone to treat you right. You are here to grow, to thrive, to build love on truth, trust, and mutual respect. Anything less is a distraction from the life you're meant to live. So if you recognize these signs, it's time to stop explaining them away and start listening to what they're trying to tell you. Because the longer you stay in something that tears you apart, the further you drift from the version of you that knows your worth. Choose yourself. Choose your peace. Choose the kind of love that doesn't make you smaller to survive, but bigger to shine. And if you're brave enough to walk away from what's not right for you, I promise, what is right will find you. But only when you make space for it. So take that step. Reclaim your power, and never settle for anything that costs you your soul. This isn't the end of your love story. It's the beginning of your healing.